Number 5. Ryell Wilson. Ryell Earl Wilson, born May 4, 1982, is an American executioner who was convicted of the 2003 Capitol assassination of two undercover New York City police officers in Staten Island, New York. His trial before Judge Nicholas Garofis of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of New York began on November 27, 2006. On December 20, 2006, he was found guilty of capital massacres as well as other related charges. On January 30, 2007, Wilson was sentenced to death, the first such sentence by a federal jury in New York since the federal death penalty was reinstated in 1988. Prosecutors alleged Wilson was the leader of a violent drug gang called the Stapleton Crew that originated in the Stapleton Houses, a public housing complex in Staten Island. He was convicted of slaughtering New York City Police Department detectives James Nemerin and Rodney Andrews in a gun sale, then searching their bodies and stealing their car. The victims' family members and fellow police officers greeted pronouncement of his death sentence with cheers and applause. Wilson reacted by sticking his tongue out in their direction. The case has attracted media attention because of the brutality of the murders and the rarity of a capital prosecution in New York. Wilson was the first federal defendant sentenced to death in New York City since 1954. In 2010, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit reversed Wilson's sentence. In the sentencing phase, the prosecutor argued that Wilson put the government to its proof of guilt rather than plead guilty, and that Wilson's allocution of remorse should be discredited because he failed to testify, notwithstanding the fact that the path for that witness stand has never been blocked for Mr. Wilson. As to the first argument, although a guilty plea may properly be considered to support a sentence mitigation for acceptance of responsibility, the Sixth Amendment is violated when failure to plead guilty is treated as an aggravating circumstance. As to the second, it is a fair argument for the prosecution to say that an allocution of remorse is unsworn and uncrossed, but the Fifth Amendment is violated when the defendant is denied a charge that limits the Fifth Amendment waiver to that which is said in the allocution, and the jury is invited to consider more generally that the defendant declined to testify. Because these constitutional violations were not harmless beyond a reasonable doubt, the court vacated Wilson's and his co-defendants' death sentences and remanded to the trial court for resentencing. After the Court of Appeals vacated Wilson's death sentence, Wilson moved from the United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute, to the Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn. While in the MDC, he fathered a child with federal officer Nancy Gonzalez during an illicit rendezvous in the staff bathroom on July 15, 2012. On March 22, 2013, Gonzalez gave birth to a son named Eustace. On July 24, 2013, a Brooklyn federal jury sentenced Wilson to death for the 2003 murders, reinstating the previous death sentence that was thrown out in 2010. During his direct appeal, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals remanded the case to the District Court with direction to reconsider, in light of an intervening Supreme Court case, the District Court's earlier ruling that Wilson is not intellectually disabled. On March 15, 2016, Judge Garofis concluded that Wilson is mentally handicapped, making him ineligible for execution under the Eighth Amendment. Federal prosecutors later announced they would not appeal this ruling. Wilson was resentenced to life in prison without parole. As of 2024, Wilson is serving his sentence at USP Coleman II in Sumter County, Florida. Number 4. Photios, Freddy Geas. Geas was born into a Greek family, therefore he could not be a made member of the Italian mafia. Geas and his brother Ty were well-known enforcers feared within their community. The Geas brothers worked with Anthony Arrelotta, another mobster. In 2003, Arrelotta was formally inducted into the Genovese crime family Springfield faction. Arrelotta had requested that the Geas brothers slaughter his brother-in-law, Gary Westerman. Acting boss Arthur Nigro organized a hit on aging gangster Adolfo Bruno. Both hits were carried out in 2003. In 2011, Geas was charged with the murders of Gary Westerman and Adolfo Bruno. He was also indicted as the getaway driver in the failed assassination attempt of Bronx Union boss Frank Dadabo after Dadabo was involved in an argument with Nigro over Tony Bennett concert tickets. During the 2011 trial, Geas was shocked to see his former associate Arturo testify against him. Geas was known for his strict code. He despised snitches and men who abused women. Geas refused to cooperate with law enforcement and was sentenced to life in prison. On October 29, 2018, infamous Boston gangster Whitey Bulger was transferred from the Federal Transfer Center in Oklahoma City to United States Penitentiary Hazleton in West Virginia. At 8:20 a.m. on October 30th, the 89-year-old Bulger was found unresponsive in the prison. Bulger was in a wheelchair and had been beaten to death by multiple inmates armed with a sock-wrapped padlock and a shiv. His eyes had nearly been gouged out and his tongue almost cut off. This was the third homicide at the prison in a 40-day span. Correctional officers had warned Congress just days before the most recent Hazleton death that facilities were being dangerously understaffed. Geas was the primary suspect in orchestrating the executing of Bulger. In August 2022, he, along with Paul DeCollegiero and Sean McKinnon, were indicted on first-degree assassination charges. In September 2023, Geas was transferred to ADX Florence. Geas had his plea agreement unsealed at his sentencing on September 6, 2024, where he received a 25-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter and assault resulting in bodily injury. Number 3. Dario Antonio Usuga. Dario Antonio Usuga, alias Otoniel, was the head of Colombia's most powerful criminal group, the Urabenos, and the country's most wanted man. But his grip on power had steadily been weakening as security forces gradually closed in and he was captured in the municipality of Necoclí, near Colombia's northern border with Panama. Colombia's President Iván Duque announced on October 23, 2021. Since his capture, the Urabenos have struggled to maintain their cohesion as substructures and franchises within the gang have sought more independence without the unifying leadership of Otoniel. After his arrest, Otoniel appeared several times before Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace to testify about his participation in organized crime, his history with paramilitary groups, and his connections with authorities. On May 4, 2022, he was extradited to the United States to face drug trafficking charges in the Southern District Court of New York. And in early 2023, he pleaded guilty running a criminal organization, conspiracy to distribute narcotics by sea, and to conspiracy to import narcotics. Otoniel began his underworld career as a member of the now demobilized guerrilla group, the Popular Liberation Army. Though he demobilized in 1991, at the age of 19, along with some 2,500 other guerrilla members, he returned to fighting soon after when he and his brother Juan de Dios Usuga, alias Giovanni, signed up with the paramilitary. After Don Mario's capture by Colombian authorities in 2009, Otoniel and Giovanni assumed complete control of the Urabenos. Under the brothers' command, the Urabenos expanded across the country using a mix of violence and deal-making, setting them on the path to eventually become the most powerful criminal group in Colombia. In January 2012, the security forces killed Giovanni, leaving Otoniel as the maximum leader of the Urabenos. Since then, he has headed a small command group dominated by his ex-comrades, either absorbing their rivals or wiping them out, and they soon became the only Colombian criminal organization remaining with a truly national reach. In 2015, the security forces launched Operation Agamemnon, an offensive that sent top anti-drug officials and over 1,000 police and military officials to Urabá to target the Urabenos' operations and hunt down Otoniel. The criminal leader made requests to the government to negotiate his surrender, including via a public video appeal in which he publicly made the request in September 2017. However, these negotiations did not successfully result in his surrender. That same year, Colombian police stated that Agamemnon had dismantled half of the Urabenos, although that number is hard to quantify. In 2018, the operation was renewed as Agamemnon II, with up to 3,000 soldiers reportedly dedicated to fighting the Urabenos. This maintained pressure certainly weakened Otoniel, who saw his closest advisors captured or slaughtered, his brother, sister, and cousin arrested and extradited to the United States. Following his capture, Colombian media reports revealed how he had spent his final months trying to stay ahead of security forces. After his arrest, Otoniel appeared several times in front of Colombia's Special Jurisdiction for Peace to testify about his criminal group's involvement in organized crime, his history with paramilitary groups, and their links to authorities and public figures. His extradition to the United States in May 2022 set up a landmark trial in which numerous revelations about the full extent of his criminal activities are set to be revealed. After Otoniel pleaded guilty in January 2023, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, Breon Peace, stated that, with today's guilty plea, the bloody reign of the most violent and significant Colombian narcotics trafficker since Pablo Escobar is over. As part of his guilty plea, Otoniel agreed to hand over $216 million and faces prison time of between 20 years and life. Number 2. Ronald Herron, Raw Diggs. Ronald Herron, born in 1982, known as Raw Diggs, is an American inmate and former rapper and convicted murderer, gang leader, and drug trafficker, formerly based in Brooklyn, New York City. Raw Diggs was arrested on October 5, 2010, on drug charges, and was alleged to be leader of the Bloods-affiliated murderous Mad Dogs. He was convicted on June 26, 2014, of 21 federal charges, including racketeering, drug dealing, and 3 murders. At trial, several of Raw Diggs' songs and music videos were used as evidence because they were literal recounting of his crimes. The federal prosecuting attorney said, "He styled himself as a rap artist, but the jury's verdict makes clear who Herron really is, a drug dealer and slaughterer who sought power through fear and intimidation." On April 2, 2015, he was sentenced to 3 life terms plus 105 years in prison. He told the judge that he could give him 10 life terms and that he was only going to die once, after which he was sentenced to 12 life terms plus 105 years in prison. He is currently incarcerated at ADX Florence in Colorado. On April 8, 2015, Herron sent an appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, claiming that his conviction violated his constitutional First Amendment rights. The conviction was upheld on February 14, 2019, with the court saying that his First Amendment challenge was without merit. Number 1. Arturo Gallegos Castron. Arturo Gallegos Castron has at least 7 aliases, including Benny, Farmero, 51, Guero, Pecas, Turi, and 86. He was a lieutenant with the Barrio Azteca, which the Justice Department describes as a violent street and prison gang that began in the late 1980s and expanded into a transnational criminal organization. Prosecutors said the gang is allied with the La Linea, part of the Juarez drug cartel, which is also known as the Vicente Carrillo Fuentes drug cartel. The Sinaloa cartel is an enemy of the alliance in the struggle to control the drug trafficking route through Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. Known as the Juarez Plaza, this drug route is a principal illicit drug trafficking route into the United States, prosecutors said. Chihuahua-based Gallegos Castron was extradited to the United States in 2012, and a federal jury thereafter found him guilty of 6 counts of homicide and conspiracies to commit racketeering, narcotics trafficking, narcotics importation, homicide in a foreign country, and money laundering. The jury had found that Gallegos Castron led the gang's teams of assassins, which he helped create and supervised in 2008 through 2010. His teams massacred up to 800 persons between January and August 2010, reaching a total of nearly 1,600 in a multi-year period, according to a statement from the Justice Department. On March 13, 2010, Gallegos Castron ordered the triple homicide in Ciudad Juarez of U.S. Consulate, employee her husband. Gallegos Castron had been among 35 defendants charged in the third superseding indictment filed over the 2010 Juarez Consulate massacres and other criminal acts.